Good afternoon and welcome to Virginia Board for People with Disabilities Continuing Education Workshop Session sponsored by the Alumni Development Program's Training Alumni. On behalf of Virginia Board for People with Disabilities, we'd like to thank you for joining us both here in the classroom as well as on Facebook Live. Today's session is entitled Supported Decision Making, Protecting Rights, Ensuring Choices, and Aging Caregivers. We want to share with you that these continuing education sessions are sponsored by our training alumni. They are graduates of both our Partners in Policy Making training program and our Youth Leadership Academy, formerly the Youth Leadership Forum. So these alumni come together and they identify and select the various topics that Virginia Board offers through the Alumni Development Program. The mission of the ADP training alumni is to provide advocacy trainings and continuing education workshops focused on the broader disability community in the Commonwealth of Virginia. In order for us to deliver these very exciting, informative, provocative sessions, it takes a village. And so we want to acknowledge, first of all, our executive director, Ms. Terry Morgan, for her leadership, and the various teams from our agency that supports our work. From the administration team, Mr. Henry Street, director, Ms. Tara Bethay, the board administrative specialist. From our communications team, Ms. Anita Ayers, who serves as the communications and information manager, and Ms. Brittany Hughes, who is the communications assistant. And we welcome as our closed captioner today from Virginia Relay, Ms. Caitlin Hine. Representing Boydnott Visual Communications, which is our audio-visual vendor, Mr. Eli Red serves as what I call our technology guru. He's listed here as technician. We work very closely with DAR's procurement in order to process all of our budgetary obligations. Representing Mosaic Interpreting Team is Mr. Tristan Brown, who is, of course, an ASL interpreter, and Ms. Felicia Smith, serving also as an ASL interpreter. Handling all of our evaluations for all of the training and alumni development programs and for our agency is the Director of Planning, Research, and Evaluation, Ms. Nia Harrison. And of course, representing our unit training and alumni development programs is the great Ms. Christine Jermeyer, who is the coordinator for training and ADP, the Alumni Development Program, and Ms. Kelly Vanella, who serves as the YLA coordinator. You have seen already in your view that we have put up two polls. The first poll that you are experiencing is called the About You poll. And it is simply for us to understand who is here, who is present, who is in the room. And then secondly, at the very end of this session, about 10 minutes before we conclude at 2 p.m., we will put up the session feedback poll. And we ask that you would please give us critical feedback so that we might be able to make any adjustments or recognize what we can do differently as we bring back these sessions in the future. If there is an accommodation need for an alternative format, we ask that you would email Nia Harrison at vbpd.virginia.gov after the event, and Christine will certainly be dropping that email in the chat. You have now heard from me. Our agenda will flow as outlined. We will have the actual presentation, Supported Decision Making, Protecting Rights, and Ensuring Choices, and Aging Caregivers. First up will be Attorney Jonathan Martinez, who serves as the Senior Director for Law and Policy from the Burton Black Institute at Syracuse University. He is also known as the attorney for the Jenny Hatch case. And I will invite Attorney Jonathan Martinez to share a little bit more about that if he chooses. We also have our agency, one of our disability agency partners, very happy to welcome Ms. Sarah Thompson, from who will be, again, facilitating her workshop session on supported decision-making community resource consultant, or she serves as the supported decision-making community resource consultant from Virginia Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services. Sorry about that, Sarah. And following their presentations, we will have Q&A, and then we'll have closing from our Executive Director, Terry Morgan, and then yours truly will come back with the final close. Let me now introduce to you again Attorney Jonathan Martinez, Senior Director for Law and Policy at Syracuse University, and following him will be Ms. Sarah Thompson. We will come back once Attorney Martinez has finished and reintroduce Sarah Thompson for supported decision-making community, who is the supported decision-making community resource consultant, Virginia Department for Behavioral Health and Developmental Services. I now yield my time to Attorney Martinez.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sweetenberg-Lee. Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan Martinez. It's my pleasure, my honor to be here today to talk to you about my favorite subject, and that is supported decision-making. Supported decision-making is, in my opinion, the greatest advance for human and civil rights for people with disabilities and older adults since the Americans with Disabilities Act. My job today is to teach you the why of supported decision-making, why it's important, why you should consider it. But before I begin, I always make two promises to every audience I talk to. The first one is this. If you've heard of supported decision-making, you've probably heard about it as an alternative to guardianship. Something you can do instead of going into guardianship, something you can do to come out of a guardianship, and that is true. But I have to make you this promise because it's also true. You're not going to hear me say there should never be guardianships. You're not going to hear me say that if you're a guardian, you did the wrong thing, or that no one should ever go into guardianships, or that guardianship is wrong or evil. That is not my point in speaking to you today. Of course, there are times when guardianship is appropriate. What I want to do is to give you information, to give you tools that you can use and think about to make sure that if you're thinking about guardianship, that it is the right choice, or that you know all of your options. Because as you're going to hear, guardianship, when it's not appropriate, can hurt people. Second promise, the things you hear me talk about today are going to be backed by one of two things, law and science. This is not coming out of midair. This is not hippy-trippy vaporware. This is things that have been tested and true for decades. So with that in mind, let's begin. I'm going to share my screen. And the first thing I want you to do is do something people don't often do, which is think about your rights. I want you to think about the things that are important to you. Think about your favorite rights. And yes, I know it's strange to ask you to think about your favorite right, but think about it for a second. What are the rights that make you proudest to be an American, a Virginian, and a human being? What are the ones that you would fight for if someone tried to take them away? Freedom of speech, the right to vote, the right to worship, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. What do these rights have in common? Choice. Every right we have really comes down to choice, doesn't it? Freedom of speech is the right to choose what to say and what not to say. Freedom of religion is the right to choose how and where and even whether we worship. The right to vote is the right to choose who will govern us. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, the right to choose how and where and with whom we live our lives. There's a great quote up on your screen that says, I am my choices. Each and every one of us are the sum total of the choices that we've made. And I mean all the choices, the good ones, the bad ones, the significant ones, the silly ones. They make up who we are. So if you ask me what my favorite right is, I'm going to tell you it's the right to make choices, because choice makes our rights real. And when I talk about the right to make choices, I'm going to use a buzzword. I'm not a big buzzword fan, but this one is really pretty important. It's called self-determination. You've probably heard it before. When I say self-determination, I want you to think about making choices, being in charge of your life. When people are self-determined, they do things instead of having things done for them. They make choices instead of having choices made for them. They are the actors, the causal actors in their lives. And here is something that we know from about 40 years of studies, that people with disabilities, and in particular people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, who are more self-determined, who make more choices, have better lives. Study after study after study has shown that people with disabilities who are more self-determined, who do more things for themselves, who make more choices for themselves, have a better quality of life. They're going to be more likely to be independent and employed and live in the community. But here's another question. Are your rights worth anything? Those rights we just talked about. Are they worth anything if you're not allowed to use them? If you have them in theory but not in practice? If I say to you, sure, you have freedom of speech, but you're only going to talk when I tell you to, and you're only going to say what I tell you to say. Is that a right? Or, sure, you have the right to vote, but only if I take you to the election center and only if you vote for the person I tell you to. That's not a right, is it? If you take choice out of the equation, our rights really don't matter. And yet that's what's been happening to older adults and people with disabilities for about 1,500 years. Quick confession, I am a big legal geek. I admit it. I can tell you that the very first time that we saw guardians really pop up in the Western tradition, in fact, the very first time that we had one set of laws in the Western tradition was in the ancient Roman Empire. About 1,500 years ago, an emperor named Justinian gets all the governors from all of the provinces together and says, essentially, we want to have one law for Rome, from one side to the other side of Rome. So they got together, they harmonized the law, they put it in a book. It's called the Justinian Code. I am such a geek. I have a copy. I have read it. I named one of my sons Justin. So I can tell you that the Justinian Code is the first time in the Western legal tradition that a country, an empire, had all their laws in one place. And one of those laws said, if you were feeble-minded, and that was their word for people with disabilities and people with cognitive impairments, you had to have a curator over you to make decisions in your place. And that started what I feel is a culture or a tradition or an expectation that if you have any limitations, if you're a person with any developmental or intellectual disabilities, you can't do things and you have to have someone over you. And that tradition and culture has followed us ever since. For example, in Great Britain, where we got most of our laws, in the Middle Ages, they updated Justinian. And what they said is if you are an idiot or a lunatic, and those were their words for people with disabilities, you had to have a committee over you to make decisions for you. In America, we followed that tradition. We just call it guardianship, and in some states, conservatorship. Now, look, before I say another word, again, I'm not here to tell you that guardianship, conservatorship are wrong or bad things. And in fact, if they're needed, they can do very good things and help people. My godson is under guardianship, and thank God for it. But what I'm talking about, what I get concerned about, is that expectation that people with disabilities have to have guardians or cannot do things on their own. And here's how I can show you how that expectation has followed us. In Virginia and in just about every other state, what the law says is this. Here's how guardianship should work. A judge looks at me. And if that judge decides that there are some things or some rights that I simply cannot exercise, what that judge is supposed to do is take away only those rights that I cannot exercise and give them to someone else. That person becomes my guardian. And I do repeat, only those things that I cannot do. But here's the dangerous part. What we know from studies is that in over 90% of cases, the judge takes away all rights. Those are called full or plenary guardianships. Regardless of what the person can do, regardless of what the person wants, the judge takes away all the rights. And I've heard judges tell me it's just easier. It's just easier to check all the boxes than figure out which boxes to choose. And you know what? If you need a plenary guardianship, great. But if you don't, imagine what it must feel like to know that you can do things, to know that you have done things, and then not to be allowed to do them, to be told that you are incompetent, to lose a right you have exercised and could exercise. And that's why I say guardianship is not a bad thing. It is not a good thing. It is an important thing. It is a thing that we must use carefully and correctly, because if we misuse guardianship, if we take away rights from people who are able to exercise them, very bad things can happen. As the National Academy of Elder Lawyers has said, plenary and full guardians have substantial and often complete control over the lives of vulnerable people. As the AARP says, this can include the right to make the most basic health and personal and financial decisions, where people go, what they do, who they see, whether they even can date. Imagine what that must be like if you are the person who loses those rights. And just like I said, that self-determination leads to a better quality of life for people with disabilities, we know that the opposite's true. We know, going back to studies in the 1970s, that when people with disabilities lose self-determination, when they lose their right to make choices, their lives can get worse. 50 years ago, we knew that people who lost self-determination would feel helpless, hopeless, and self-critical. The rest of that sentence, they would not, quote unquote, behave because they saw no point in behaving. More recently, we know that people who lose self-determination have lower self-esteem. They're more passive. They feel inadequate. They're less able to function. And if you think about it, that's not rocket science. If I tell you over and over and over, you can't do something, are you feeling particularly motivated to try? Of course not. There's even a term for that. It's called learned helplessness, that people who lose one right feel like it's their fault. And they don't want to do new things because they feel like they would mess those up too and it would be their fault as well. So where can we go from here? I made you a promise. I am keeping it. There is nothing wrong with guardianship when it's appropriate. There's absolutely times when guardianship is needed. If a person is so incapacitated that they cannot take part in the decision-making process, of course, guardianship is appropriate. If there's someone who does not want to be part of the decision-making process and is putting their health or safety at risk, guardianship's a pretty good solution. In an emergency, if there is no one there to help, a temporary guardianship at least can be very, very helpful. So I'm not here to say there should never be guardianships, but what I'm here to say is there should never be guardianships just because you're a certain number of years old, or you have a certain disability, or you need help, or the two you see at the bottom of your screen that I hear over and over and over, and they frankly turn my stomach, because that's the way it's always been, and because it's for your own good. And that last one, I hear a lot. It's for their own good. If my son or my daughter doesn't have a guardian, they're going to make a bad choice, so I need to do it for their own good. If I don't get a guardian over my loved one, they might sign something they shouldn't sign or do something they shouldn't do or meet something they shouldn't meet. So it's for their own good. And I will tell you this, I never question the motivation of a parent or a loved one who wants to help someone they care about. Because what I found, and I've been doing this for a long time, is that the vast majority of people seeking guardianship really want to help someone they care about. But I also talk to them about law and history, and there's a great quote from the US Supreme Court up on your screen right now. It's about 100 years old, and it's still true today. What it really comes down to saying is, when we mean the most well, is when we have to be the most careful, because the greatest dangers to liberty lie in the insidious encroachment of people who mean well, but don't really understand the consequences of what we're doing. People who think that I have no choice but to seek guardianship, that guardianship is my only option, that guardianship is the only thing that will help my child, that guardianship is for their own good, and don't think about the decades of studies showing that the loss of self-determination can cause real harm in people's lives. I mean, again, I hear it time and time again. And what I often ask people to do is look in the mirror and think about their own lives. Because I hear it. I hear, they might sign something they shouldn't sign or do something they shouldn't do. They might waste money. They might have a bad relationship. And I ask people to look in the mirror. We can do an exercise right now. If you have ever closed on a mortgage or signed an apartment lease, I want you to think about that process, especially the mortgage one. I've done it a bunch. When you do a mortgage, there's a bunch of people around a table, whether real or in Zoom, and there's a lawyer and an assistant and blah, 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 and they're talking jargon. But what there is a stack of papers up to the ceiling, whether digital or real. And those papers are put in front of you one at a time, and someone just goes sign here or click here every time, right? Well, ask yourself this. Did you read those papers before you signed them? Because if you were like me, you didn't. What that means is that I and you put hundreds of thousands of dollars and decades of your life in the hands of a bank without understanding the terms, without knowing if the interest rate fluctuates, without knowing if there was a prepayment penalty, without knowing how it would be collected. Man, you wasted potentially a ton of money and time. That's a terrible decision. Doesn't that mean you need a guardian? Or what about medical care? Have you ever had surgery, ever consented to a medical procedure? And I did about a week ago. And I will tell you what happens in one of those is you get people putting papers in front of your face, all speaking jargon. I'm your doctor, I'm your nurse, I'm your anesthesiologist. You don't know what they're saying or what they're talking about, but what you know is pieces of paper are going in front of your face and they say, sign here. Well, if you're like me, you didn't read them either. You put your hands and your safety and your life in the hands of strangers. Maybe you waived your right to sue in court. That's a terrible decision. Don't you need a guardian? Maybe you've done my favorite way that I dealt with the pandemic. I mean, thank Lord it's 5 years out. We're pretty much, over it. But think about what you did during the pandemic. Think about whether you played my favorite pandemic game, which was this. Have a bunch of drinks and see what shows up from Amazon tomorrow. I was the champ of that game because I could tell what kind of day I was having by what showed up at my door the next day from Prime. I know that I was stress eating if I got a useless piece of exercise equipment. I knew that I wanted to stress eat if I got a useless piece of kitchen equipment. Well, if you did something like that, if you engaged in some retail therapy, I want you to think about how you wasted your money. Those were bad decisions. Don't you need guardians? In fact, we all need guardians if the qualification of needing a guardian is making a bad decision. But here's another question I have for you. Have you ever had a bad relationship and learned what a good one is? Haven't we all? Have you ever woken up in the morning and said something like, wow, I am never doing that again, but I'm kind of glad I did. Man, we even have terms for that. We call them life lessons and teachable moments. Because here's a little secret that we all know, that when we make mistakes, they make us smarter. We learn from our lumps. The mistakes we make, the mistakes I've made, have, I hope, made me a better, stronger, smarter attorney and human being. That's what we do when we make errors. So what we do when we say, I don't want my child, my mother, my brother, my loved one to make a mistake. I want this for their own good. Aren't we saying that they don't deserve the same rights to grow as everyone else? And here's another way of looking at that. I want you to think back for a second. If you're old like me, you can remember 1995. The more I do presentations like this, the more and more people I meet who were not alive in 1995, and it reminds me that 1995 really is a long time ago. So on behalf of everyone who remembers 1995 well, to those who don't, we hate you. But 1995, I want you to think about, if you remember it, what it was like for people with disabilities. 1995 was only 5 years after the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed. It was another 5 years before the Supreme Court would say that people with disabilities have the right to live in the community. Before then, it was okay to say to a person with disabilities, you will live in an institution. It doesn't matter where you want to live or how well you could live, that's where you're living. In 1995, a sheltered workshop where people with disabilities made less than minimum wage was considered to be a preferred outcome, where schools and vocational rehabilitation could brag about the number of people they placed in sheltered workshops. In 1995, we didn't have programs or technology like we have today. Fast forward, it's really only 30 years. It's not that long. Right now, people with disabilities have a Supreme Court protected right to live in the community. Right now, working in an integrated job, making regular pay, paying regular taxes is an expectation, and God knows someday, I hope I'll say it's a right. Right now, we have supports and services, we have technology. Think about the phones you have. I mean, the ones I hope you're not looking at right now. But think about what these things do. We spend way more time on our phones doing things other than talking. With my phone, I can schedule and have a telemedicine appointment. I can invite someone to that appointment to conference in, by the way, to make sure I understand the doctor understands me. With my phone, I can bank and budget. And if I want, I can invite someone else and give someone else access to my information to help me understand and figure out how to use my money better. With my phone, I can refill prescriptions, make appointments. With my phone, I can manage my health. I once worked with a person in DC who had diabetes and a traumatic brain injury. And because of the traumatic brain injury, she didn't always remember to look after her blood sugar. They had a couple of crashes. She's exactly the type of person who would have been in an institution in 1995. But what she had was a free app, free, that connected her phone to her glucose monitor. And when her levels got too low, it would send her a text, "You should eat something." And if it got lower still, it would text her mother and her sister and her doctor so they could intervene. And just like that, and for free, she was able to manage her health because she had people to help her and technology to help her. So what I'm getting at is this. Who's going to disagree with me when I say that we have more ways to make more people more independent right now than ever before? That's an easy one, right? We do. We have more ways to make more people more independent. But here's the thing. The number of people in guardianship has tripled since 1995. In that time, when we have been finding ways to help people be more independent, more and more and more people have lost their rights. And statistically speaking, they have lost all of their rights. And before you say it's because we're getting older, and believe me, every morning I know we're getting older. According to the National Council on Disabilities, the fastest growing segment going into guardianship are young adults 18 to 24. People with the greatest potential to learn and grow are instead losing their rights, probably all of their rights, for the rest of their life. And why? Because someone meant well. The greatest dangers to liberty lie in people who mean well. So what I want people to think about is to think that 1,500 years of culture expecting that guardianship is your only choice are too much, because the science is scary. We know that when people go into guardianships they do not need, it can have a significant negative impact on their physical and mental health. They can live less long, function less well, feel less well. On the other hand, we know that when people with disabilities make more choices, when they have more independence, they have a better quality of life. Study after study after study has shown that people with more independence and make more choices, more self-determination, are more likely to be higher educated, better employed, and make more money, and more likely to live in the community. The number one reason I hear for guardianship, the number one is safety. If I don't get guardianship, my son or my daughter in particular might get hurt. They might get abused. And again, I never question someone who wants to help someone they love, but I do talk about science, including the study up on your screen right now. This is one of a series of studies done by a professor named Ishita Kemka that's truly groundbreaking. Because what Dr. Kemka looked at was the relationship between safety and self-determination. And she worked with a group of women with intellectual and developmental disabilities. If you don't know this horrible fact, you should. Women with ID and DD are far, far more likely to be abused or neglected physically, emotionally, sexually than anyone else. It's horrible. So Dr. Kemka worked with people with IDD, and in particular, she made sure they had similar abilities and limitations. I'm not a scientist. I call that an apples to apples study. She made sure everyone in this study had similar abilities and limitations. And what she did, she divided them into two groups. One group, she said, go live your lives. The other group, she gave access to a recognized curriculum designed to enhance self-determination, to give people more information about ways that they can control their own lives and make choices. When they were done, she brought them back together and gave them a test, a recognized test, that was designed to determine their ability to recognize potentially abusive situations and avoid them. And guess what she found? Apples to apples, remember. The ones who had more self-determination, who made more choices, who understood that they had the right to make choices, were better able to recognize and avoid abusive situations. And again, it's not rocket science. If you know it's your body, your life, your stuff, your choice, aren't you going to fight like hell when someone tries to take them away? So I have told people and parents and professionals and judges across this country this one message. If you want to enhance safety, don't take away rights. Enhance abilities, enhance self-determination, because knowing that, having that option is what gives us the power to say no and fight back. I often tell people, if you think about Rapunzel, who was put up in the high tower with everything she ever needed, the idea that she'd never get out and would always be safe and secure there, she got out. Children, adults, we're going to find trouble. They're going to meet people. We all do. You can't put people in a bubble. And what I would want for my child is my child to have what they need to understand that they can fight back and that no is an option. That's what self-determination is done. And here's what I call the cherry on top of the sundae. This is called the National Core Indicator Study. Remember, I warned you I'm a geek. I have a favorite study. The National Core Indicator Study was done across the country in almost every state, Virginia included. And what the NCI looked at was the quality of life of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And again, it was an apples to apples study. It even used the old terminology, mild, moderate, and severe disabilities. And it would compare people with mild disabilities to people with mild disabilities, moderate, moderate, severe, severe. And what the NCI looked at was the impact of certain things on quality of life. One of the things they looked at was whether or not a person had a guardian. And here's what they found across the country. Apples to apples, remember. People who did not have guardians were more likely to work, live independently, have friends, be part of their community, and practice the religion of their choice than people with similar abilities and limitations who did have guardians. Such a surprise, they did it again a few years later, and they found the same thing. People with disabilities without guardians are more likely to be respected in their community, be part of their community, work in their community, than those of similar abilities and limitations who did have guardians. So I tell people is this, look at your screen. If you're a parent, isn't this exactly what you want for your child? So what I say that this means is that 1,500 years of expecting you have no other choice than guardianship is too many. Your child, your loved one may need a guardian. But if we think that's our only choice, we may be taking away opportunities from them. So where do we go from here? What I hope I just did was I showed you that self-determination is the key to a good quality of life for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And we got 40 years of studies on that. And I hope I've shown you the other side of that coin, that losing self-determination can cause harm to quality of life. But if we accept those two things as true, and I would suggest the science says we have to, there's one more thing we have to agree on, and that's this. People with disabilities, older adults, they need help. I mean, we all need help. You should have seen me trying to sign on to this. I had to get help every time trying to share a screen. But we all need help every single day. So that's what I want to start with. I want us all to agree on those things. That we need to, one, maximize people's self-determination because that's what's directly related to quality of life. And two, we got to make sure that people have help. The help they need to exercise their self-determination effectively and safely. And if we can agree on that, we can move forward because I got a way forward for you. And that's called supported decision-making. And I know I'm 20 slides in and I'm just getting to the point. But supported decision-making is a way to make sure that people have the benefits of self-determination and of help. What's self-determination? What's supported decision-making? Good news, there's a definition on your screen. You can read it, you can screenshot it. You'll note that my name is on it because I wrote it. You will find this definition in textbooks and articles, and I would read it out loud, but there's a lot of words, and spoiler alert, I hate this definition. I hate it. It's written by someone, me, who was intellectually insecure at the time, who wanted to get something fancy in a journal about through which people with disabilities, blah, 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 blah. You want to know what supported decision-making is? Here's how we can figure it out. How do you make decisions? What do you do when you don't know what to do? When you go to the doctor and the doctor speaks jargon, if you're like me, you say to the doctor, would you please explain that to me like I'm a 3-year-old? If you go to the auto mechanic and like me, you don't know about cars and they throw a bunch of jargon at you, I call a friend and I say, they're telling me to do all these things. is this right? What do I do? Maybe you Google things. Maybe you call somebody. Maybe you do research. Maybe you talk to a colleague. When you do that, you're using supported decision making. Because what supported decision making is getting the help you need from the people that you know and the people you trust and the sources you know, so that you can understand the decisions you have to make and make them. And that's it. It's what everyone does every single day. Think about the cliches that we have about decision making. Because, people without disabilities, we don't call it supported decision making. And by the way, people without disabilities, I got a word for you all. It's called TAB, temporarily able-bodied, because each and every one of us is one moment away, one slip, one fall, one diagnosis, one injury, one heart attack, one stroke, one anything from being a person with disabilities. But if you are lucky enough to be a TAB, you're using supported decision making every day, but you don't call it that because who calls it that? But I want you to think about the cliches we use about decision making. We say, get a second opinion. We say, don't make a snap judgment. We say, don't rush to judgment. We say, don't go off half-cocked. We say, like my dad used to say, if you measure twice, you only have to cut once. These all mean the same thing. Get the help you need to figure out what you have to do and do it. And that is something that we all do. So that's all supported decision making is. The difference is, for 1,500 years, if you're a person with intellectual developmental disabilities and you say, I don't get it, can you please explain it to me? Society, ever since Justinian, has decided that means you're dumb and you can't do things. If you're a person without disabilities and you say, I'm not sure about the answer about that, let me do some checking, and you call a colleague, you're smart. You're considered to be wise. That's the difference. Now, I'll tell you this. Guardianship really comes down to one question. And the laws, I'm not going to bore you with Virginia's law or any other law. Really, the question of guardianship comes down to something called capacity. Or are you able to make decisions? People who are unable to make decisions should have guardians. Well, the supported decision making challenges us to ask what it means to be unable, right? Because I want you to think about some of the decisions you have to make in your life. When you go to the doctor, when I go to the doctor anyway, and I am a big baby at the doctor, and I say, I feel really bad, can I have medicine? And the doctor gives me medicine, and I say, thank you, doctor, and I take the medicine. I've made the decision to take that medicine, but I have no idea what's in that medicine. I can't even spell erythromycin. I don't know what's in a Z-Pack, but here's what happened. I had someone, my doctor, who I gave information to, who I trust, who gave me support. Hey, you should take this medicine, leading me to take it and feel better. That's an absolute perfect example of supported decision making. Because unless I have that doctor, by the way, I have no way to take care of my health unless I have a medical degree. So I can make the decision to take that medicine without having the ability to create that medicine. I can get a chest tube put in and decide to have a chest tube put in, as I did a week ago, without knowing how to put that chest tube in. So think about what it means to be able or unable. There are decisions in your life that you can make right now without help. We all have them. They're different for everyone. But there's other decisions that we need some assistance with because we don't understand. We need to do some research. And there are some that we simply cannot make without help. And there's sometimes in some days where we can make decisions better than others. You ever be sick and go, hey, I better not do anything important today? Do you ever be bummed out and say, I better not make any judgments today? So if the only qualifier of having a guardian is whether you're able to make decisions, we all need guardians depending upon the decision or the moment. So that's what I tell people all the time, is two questions should guide us with regard to guardianship. If you can only make decisions if you have help, do you need a guardian? And the answer to that better be no, because otherwise we all need guardians. And two, before we seek guardianship, before we take away rights, before we take away self-determination, shouldn't we have to ask this one incredibly important question? What else have you tried? Because how can you know that a person is unable unless you've tried to make them able. And yes, by the way, I know there are exceptions to that. A person in a coma, a person at end stage Alzheimer's related dementia, a person with perhaps the severest and profoundest intellectual disabilities. I get that they can't make decisions, and we can probably know that. But for the vast majority of people, shouldn't we be trying to empower them before we decide that they cannot make decisions? That's not my position, by the way, only. That's the position of the National Guardianship Association. The National Guardianship Association is made up of guardians, by guardians, and for guardians. Their website is guardianship.org. They certify guardians, they have a code of ethics for guardians, they train guardians. There is no one more invested in guardianship than the NGA. And here's what they say. Before guardianship, try something else. See if you can empower someone. Try supported decision making, because it might work. It might help the person become more able to make their own decisions. It might help the person be more self-determined. And it might not. And if it doesn't, there's nothing wrong with guardianship. But we shouldn't rush into it, because supported decision making can help people the same way it helps people without disabilities. Think about, now that you know that you use supported decision making, think about the way you use it. Think about what it does for you. It helps you narrow down your options. It helps you figure out what your choices are. It helps you, when you work with people, kind of make a pro and a con list. It helps you kind of take emotion out of the issues to narrow down so you can see the forest for the trees, and of your many options, pick the one that's best for you. Well, that works for people with disabilities too. They might need more help. They might not. They might need different kinds of help. They might not. But the fact is, in the same way that we ourselves seek support and we use support, people with disabilities have shown over and over and over again, and I mean in studies, that they can do the same things. And here's the good news. I know you're thinking to yourself right now, like so many do, okay, thanks a lot, hippie. Get to the point. How do I do it? What's the step? What's the app? What's the book? What's step one? And here's the good news. You know this already. There isn't one. You know that there's no one way to do this. I speak as a person who has published not one, but 2 books on supported decision making. And if you ever hear me or anyone else say, I have the one and only way to do it, run away. Because you already know that you make decisions your way, and I make decisions my way. And we all need different types of support at different ways for different decisions. Some people just need someone to talk to, an ear to listen to, a shoulder to lean on. Some people are like me and have what I call go-to people. I have people in my life I go to for very specific things. When one of my kids is having trouble in school, unfortunately a day that ends in Y, I talk to my sister, who is a school superintendent. My mom is getting older. My other sister is a gerontologist, an age specialist. We lean on my sister Judy for that. I have friends who know about cars and friends who know about finances, and I burn their ear off when I need to. We all have people in our lives. And for people with disabilities, that's the kind of thing you can put into a supported decision-making plan, which you're going to hear about soon, a power of attorney, or other kinds of documents. Some people like more formal structures. They're called micro boards or circles of support. And some of the first one of those were done in Virginia. A micro board or a circle of support, you think about it like a personal board of directors or an IEP team. You get together regularly, you talk live or virtually, you bat around the issues. I talk about my life. You give me your advice. Maybe there's some dissension or debate among you, but the point is for me to get the points of views and input so I can figure out what I want to do. Well, all of those are supported decision making, because all of them involve me going to you for information or assistance so I can do what I need to do. In fact, I think there's only 3 things you got to do to have supported decision making, and they're all easy. If you do these things, if you make these commitments, you can be the biggest advocate and biggest user in the world for supported decision making. Number 1, we all have to agree that everyone has the right to make choices to the maximum of their abilities. And that's easy. That's the Declaration of Independence. Like I said, we hold those truths to be self-evident. We all have the rights to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Number 2, I can ask Dr. Sweetenberg Lee for help making a decision without her going, oh, that must mean Jonathan can't make decisions and needs a guardian. That's easy because we all ask for help every day. All of us get help from someone in some way every day. And three, we realize that there are as many ways to give and get help as there are people. There's always another tool in the box. If the first thing you try doesn't work, try something else. Something might work. Nothing might work. And if nothing works, there's nothing wrong with guardianship. But why the rush? Why the rush? And I started with the concept of self-determination because it's so important and tied to quality of life. If we rush and decide that we have no other options, then we can hurt people. And the science is showing that people who can use supported decision-making benefit from it. We've had studies showing that people who use supported decision-making to make their own decisions, instead of having a guardian put over them, have a better quality of life. That they have more opportunities and more self-determination. And again, it's not rocket science. If I make my own decisions with support, instead of you making decisions for me, I'm going to have more control over my life and make more choices. In a study done in Virginia that I was a part of with the ARC of Northern Virginia that was thankfully supported by the Virginia Board for People with Disabilities, we worked with young adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and we empowered them to use supported decision-making. We encouraged them to work with their family members, their friends, to make a plan, whatever kind of plan they wanted to make. And they made lots of different kinds of plans. And then we talked to them and we talked to their supporters about how it went. And here's what we found across the board. The people who used supported decision-making were reported to be more independent, more confident, and they felt like they were better at making decisions. Their family members, friends, their supporters, the majority said the people were making better decisions, not just better at it, but making objectively better decisions. And this study was done during the pandemic. And the majority said they were doing more things and meeting more people. Why? Because they were more self-determined. They had more options. Last thing I want to talk to you about is safety, because some of you might be thinking to yourself, if I do this, Jonathan, how can I be sure my loved one's going to be safe? Isn't it possible they can be taken advantage of? The answer to your question is yes. I cannot promise you that people will not be taken advantage of. What I can promise you is that out there right now, people with and without disabilities are being led astray by someone they trust. That is one of the reasons why it's best to have a team of people supporting you so you can look out for each other. But that's not even what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is this. There's never been a study showing that guardianship's inherently safer for people with disabilities. And all we have to do is Google and read the news and know what we know about Britney Spears and so many others, that people have been subjected to pretty awful abuse by guardians. Doesn't mean that guardians are bad. Doesn't mean that guardianship's bad. It means that some people are bad. So what I say is this. If there's a chance I can be hurt, whether I'm in or out of guardianship, the one I'm going to at least try first is the one that's related to self-determination. Because remember Dr. Kemke's study. Self-determination, people who are more self-determined are better able to recognize and avoid abuse. So the one I'm going to try first is supported decision-making, because that empowers self-determination, which we know can empower better safety. It doesn't mean it's living in a bubble. There is no bubble we can live in. But I think there's a better chance to have a better life when we are more self-determined. And if we do that, amazing things happen. The people you see on your screen were all under guardianship. And now they're not, because they use supported decision-making. Dr. Sweetenberg Lee was kind enough to talk about Jenny Hatch, who was the person I had the honor to represent, the first person to win a trial to give her the right to use supported decision-making instead of being in guardianship. That was about 12 years ago. In the 12 years since Jenny was the first person, more than half the states, including Virginia, have changed the law to recognize supported decision-making as an alternative to guardianship. In fact, New Mexico became, I believe, state number 30 last week. So, small things we do, when we empower people, it echoes, because Jenny led to Ryan King in Washington, D.C., the first person there to escape from a guardianship, to be freed from a guardianship that his parents never wanted, by the way. They were pushed into it. because he uses supported decision making. That's him signing his power of attorney, making him the first person in DC to do that. It leads to people like Tanya, who was in a guardianship because her mom didn't know she had another option, and they left court working together. It leads to Takora, whose guardian was absent and therefore was living in a car because she had no right to sign a lease, being released from guardianship because she had a supporter next to her to help her work her way through life and work and manage her affairs. It leads to Marie in California, who didn't want to move out of California because she had a life and a job there, but her dad, her guardian, wanted to force her to move to Michigan. It led to her challenging it with her aunt, who became, with the rest of her supported decision-making team, the people who helped her lead her life out there. It leads to Scott in Wyoming, whose mom heard me speak and said to me, "My son's turning 35. I want his present to be his rights back," because I didn't know I had another option. And with their attorney and supporter, he became the first person in Wyoming freed. What it leads to is a change in the things that we do. It leads to a change in the expectations. And that's the big thing. If we start with that first commitment, that supported decision making is all about recognizing and respecting people's right to make choices, then we can do amazing things because opportunities for supported decision making are all around us. If you have a child in special education, the student-led IEP is an opportunity to exercise and practice supported decision-making. If you are working with someone in vocational rehabilitation, the informed choice process is a way to use supported decision-making to help you find the things you need to work. In medical care and in Medicaid waivers, informed choice is all about making sure you understand your options so you can choose the best thing in your healthcare. The Conversation, 5 Wishes, and other end-of-life care plans are all about me understanding what my options are when I reach the end of my journey, so I can decide what I want. Supported decision-making follows us all through life, and we have the opportunity to make it happen. And if we do that, then we change 15 years, 100 years of culture. We say that guardianship isn't the only option. And we say that people with disabilities, people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, have the same right to make the same choices, to live the same lives, to be as self-determined as anyone else. And that should be our goal. That's every parent's goal, is for their child to be as independent as possible, as safe as possible, and as healthy as possible. Supported decision-making is a way to make that a reality. And it's a way for us to say that there's more than one path. Guardianship may be an appropriate path for some. I'll never deny that, but it shouldn't be the only choice for everyone. And it's been the professional honor of my life to be involved in supported decision-making ever since Jenny Hatch walked in my door and made me realize that it's not for everyone, that some people should have the power to say, I get to make my own choices. I get to chart my life, and I want you to help me. That's what we can do together. And it would be my honor to do it with you. I'll be happy to answer any questions after the remainder of the presentation, but that's my email address on screen. If there are things that I can answer that occur to you after this presentation, please feel free to reach out to me anytime. Once again, it's been my honor, and thank you so much for listening to me today.
Wow, 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 Jonathan, outstanding, outstanding. We are going to now introduce again Sarah Thompson, and then following Ms. Thompson's presentation, we will then open the floor for questions. We have seen several expressions come through the chat. There have been a few questions, and I know Christine will hold on to them for you, Attorney Martinez. But let me now get it right and turn the remainder of the presentation over to Ms. Sarah Thompson, who serves as the supported decision-making community resource consultant for our disability agency partner, Virginia Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services. And thank you so much, Sarah, for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sweeten-Bergley. I really appreciate that. It is a long title that really the whole point is that I get the pleasure of traveling around Virginia, meeting with people and talking with people about alternatives to guardianship. And specifically, or what I find most important is alternatives that help people keep their legal rights and their decision-making abilities. So it's just a lot of words that mean I get to talk with people about decision-making. Let me get my screen shared if I can figure that out on here right now. Let's see. Here we go.
You're good. You're all set.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So just like Mr. Martinez said, I am also not going to tell you that people should not have guardianships or that guardianships are not appropriate for anyone. There are definitely times that they are appropriate and they do provide a level of support that are needed for some people. But my goal in my position is to ensure that people have the information they need to make an informed decision when they are looking at decision-making supports and options, either for themselves or for their loved ones. Because really, when it comes to supported decision-making, it's all about this informed decision-making piece. So what we are going to go over is some definitions. We'll look at the difference between supported and substitute decision-making, which might be more of what we are used to thinking about or hearing. Then we will look at supported decision-making in Virginia, some documents that we created to help people with this process. And then I also have some frequently asked questions and answers that hopefully will address questions you might have. So the first thing I always like to do, though, is to get us started with thinking a little bit about ourselves. I know you all already did that some in the first presentation, but I'd like you to take a second and just think about, have you ever made a decision that didn't turn out well? You don't have to share it with anybody, just think to yourself. Was there something you did that you're like, that didn't go as expected? Now, from that decision or that outcome, did you learn something from this? Or would you do something differently now if you were going to make the same, had to make a similar decision at this time? Thinking about that decision that you made, what kind of support would have helped you make a different decision or maybe change the outcome of the decision that you made? I'm going to show you some examples of this, but you all can also type in the chat box if you want to, different ways that or things that might have helped you when you were making this decision. So what about getting terminology explained in plain language? I know we heard about doctor's offices, the mechanic was another one, tax people. I'll just throw this out there, government documentation. And no matter at what level, is not always in plain language or understandable language. How about having reminders for important dates or appointments that may be related to that decision? Getting advice from a family member or friend? Researching online to better understand what your options are. Maybe having time to think through your choices instead of having to make a decision right away. Or what about even making a pros and cons list to kind of help you lay out the different options and the positives and negatives of each option? These are all forms of supported decision making. And I'm trying to use my little toggles to figure out how I can get to chat to see if anybody had any other thoughts.
A couple of the responses included IEPs and ISPs and the DMV. a lot of terms, a lot of acronyms.
My goodness, yes. I would say better understanding acronyms is also a form of supported decision making, for sure. There are so many acronyms out there, and if you don't understand what the acronym means, or in the case of even the acronym SDM for supported decision making, that acronym actually means multiple things depending on where you are. So if you don't understand what the acronym is referring to, you can't make the best decision for you or make a true informed decision. So again, let's think back to that decision that you made. What if because of that decision that you made, and the fact that maybe sometimes you do need help with making decisions, you could no longer do things like vote or drive. You can no longer decide if you want to be in a relationship with someone. These are just some of the legal rights that people lose when they have legal guardians or conservators in Virginia. And it's so important that people have an understanding of this so that they know what's truly at stake when considering these different types of decision-making options, either for themselves or their loved ones. Historically, people with disabilities have not been given the chance to practice supported decision-making and have gone straight into things substitute decision-making and legal guardianships when they become adults. So our goal and our hope in Virginia is that by providing more training and education and information, people with disabilities throughout Virginia will be able to keep their legal rights and be able to use supported decision-making and supported decision-making agreements as a way to get the support that they might need. So just some basic definitions for us all. I know this is a lot of text on there. So first is just decision-making. Decision-making is really this process of making choices by identifying decisions, gathering the information, and assessing alternative resolutions. Decision-making is a problem-solving skill at its basics. It is something that we are all working on our entire lives. It is something that has to be developed and learned and worked on. It is not something that when you turn 18 and you legally can make a decision for yourself, that you magically all of a sudden know everything and know what to do. That's not how it works. It actually starts at infancy, and it is a skill that can be developed even starting at infancy. Now, with supported decision-making, another possible definition for it is that it's a decision-making model in which a person makes decisions with the support of trusted individuals. I also like to throw in there the use of trusted technology, because we do live in a time and an age where we have an abundance of technology and resources that we can utilize. So this is really utilizing things and people that you trust and that know what you want. Supported decision-making is really something that, again, it's something we all do, and it can be done at any age. So again, this is a skill that can be worked on and practiced throughout a person's lifetime. Now, on the other side of this, we have substitute decision-making, and this is really something that I think people are most familiar with, especially in the field of disability services. But this is when someone else or even multiple people are appointed to make decisions for someone else. And that usually occurs when that person is identified as not being able to make decisions for them, like through a court. There's also another term that I've been seeing kind of coming out more and more, so I do include this in the trainings that I do this year, which is called shared decision-making. And this is usually more discussed in the medical field. And it's when a person and their medical team work together to discuss possible options and determine a plan of care. And as a team, they come to a consensus as to what the decision is that's going to be made. So this is different than supported decision-making, where with supported decision-making, that individual, which we like to call a decision maker, the decision maker is the one making the final decision for themselves. Whereas with shared decision-making, the individual and their whole team are agreeing upon a decision. So I have a few graphics and charts to kind of show you just about decision-making options available in Virginia. This first one is Virginia's continuum of decision-making support, and it is using the specific state codes related to each of these decision-making options. We have it spread out from left to right, looking at the least restrictive options all the way to the most restrictive options. And when we talk about restrictive options, we're looking at what helps people keep their rights and their decision-making authority and autonomy. So the least restrictive option in Virginia right now are supported decision-making agreements. And then we move through advanced medical directives, power of attorney, authorized representative, temporary or even limited guardian, and then full guardianship is seen as the most restrictive. This is also a chart that kind of breaks it down between supported decision-making and substitute decision-making. I will say that depending on whose chart you look at, you might see some different things. We do put the concepts or the supports of power of attorney and advanced directive along with supported decision-making agreements under the category of supported decision-making, because people's rights are not taken away and people are still able to make decisions as long as they are legally able to do so with those. Compared to substitute decision-making options such as guardianships and conservatorships, and then even authorized representatives, depending on which type of authorized representative we're talking about. Because Virginia does have two types, we also have a DBHDS authorized representative, which is a whole other process that I'm not going to go into today, but it is something that I think you should definitely be aware of, and I'm always happy to talk with people about that more. So the big thing is that supported decision-making is not the same thing as substitute decision-making. With supported decision-making, you keep all of your rights and you make the final decision for yourself. This helps increase self-determination, which I'm hoping you got a good idea of what that is now. And it also decreases and reduces the chances of being abused or exploited. Supported decision-making can increase capacity or your ability to understand things and reduce the need for more restrictive supports. With substitute decision-making on the other side, again, this is when someone else has chosen to make decisions for somebody else. And this does not remove all risk, as it does not guarantee that people will not be abused or exploited or find themselves in difficult situations. Some types of substitute decision-making, like legal guardianships and conservatives, are considered to be very restrictive in the sense that they can either limit or prevent a person from being able to make their own decisions and take away some, if not all, of their legal rights. So with supported decision-making, this is something that can be done informally, like many of us already do. We already use people and resources that we trust to help us make a decision. We just don't necessarily call it supported decision-making. It can also be done formally, and that's through creating a supported decision-making agreement, which we will talk more about in a few more slides. Either way, though, I do want people to have a better understanding of what it means to be a supporter. If you are supporting or helping a decision maker when it comes to this process of supported decision making. So if you are a supporter, this means that you're taking the time to learn and understand how someone best takes in information and learns. We all learn differently. We all have preferences for how we learn and take in information, so it's important to understand how somebody does that best and what their preferences are. You also need to know how somebody communicates. While we might all not use words to communicate verbally, we all communicate. So please, please make sure that you are understanding how someone communicates. I always tell providers and people in the community that it is not a person's job to communicate in a way that you understand. It is your job as a person providing support to learn how somebody communicates, to take the time to learn this and understand. So once you understand these things, you provide information in a way that they understand, and you ensure that whatever is needed in order for a person to communicate is available, whether that's kind of some augmentative communication devices or anything like that. Then, once you've done all that, when a situation comes up and a person is saying, hey, I trust you and I need the support with the decision, you are clear about what you know and don't know. someone is coming to you because they trust you. They think you have the information that they need in order to make that informed decision. And sometimes that might be true, and sometimes that might not be the case. So it's really important to let that person know, hey, either yes, I've got you, I can support you with this, or you know what, this is not my area of expertise, but I bet this person might be able to support you and help you. The other thing that you need to do is ensure that if somebody's coming to you, it is not a position or a situation where it might be a conflict of interest. So being upfront about that and saying, hey, I can't support you in this because of this potential conflict, but again, let me support you with finding somebody else who might be able to. Because ultimately, we are trying to get to this piece of the decision maker being able to truly make an informed decision. So I'm just going to give a little bit of history about supported decision-making within Virginia. I'll give you a quick few little key points of supported decision-making internationally and nationally to give a little bit of a better understanding of Virginia's timeline. So internationally, this idea of supported decision-making really came about in the 60s and 70s, 1960s, 70s, when we were looking at maybe deinstitutionalization or supporting people with moving out of hospitals and institutions and really living in a community with supports. And that happened in the United States. It also happened throughout Europe and other countries. After that, there were some various laws that other countries put in place. There was even the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities that was developed. And those all kind of helped shape what other countries have done. Now, nationally, the very first state to create a law formally recognizing supported decision-making was in 2015. And so that's what, 10 years ago, if I'm doing math correctly? And that was Texas. So we really, have not been at this very long in the grand scheme of things. So Virginia, I know that Mr. Martinez already addressed this. Our first piece of supported decision-making took place in 2013 with Ginny Hatch's case. And that really brought to light this idea of utilizing supported decision-making as an alternative to guardianship. Following that, there were some bills that that came about in Virginia to look at studying supported decision-making. The first time this happened was in 2014, and then it happened again in 2019, where the state was studying supported decision-making and its potential impact. In 2019, the ARC of Northern Virginia also did their pilot study, or their pilot program with supported decision-making with Mr. Martinez, and came up with their study findings, which all have said that, yes, supported decision-making is a beneficial piece for people with disabilities, people of the aging population, that kind of thing. In 2020, another study was conducted, specifically, though, with DBHDS leading that up. That same year, there was a bill that did not get passed in Virginia, but I think it's important for people to know about. It was called the Supported Decision-Making Act in Virginia. It didn't get passed. It got continued to 2021. There were a number of changes to it. And that ended up then becoming in 2021 the bill that got passed, which is our House Bill 2230, which directs DBHDS to hire staff, that would be me, to look at really figuring out what does supported decision-making and supported decision-making agreements look like for Virginia and providing ongoing education and support. So in 2021, we conducted a work group made up of self-advocates and other partner agencies and stakeholders throughout the Commonwealth that helped us kind of look at what the bill said, which I will put up on the screen now. You can see 2 paragraphs, what we had to work with. And it said that we essentially, needed to come up with guidance and materials around supported decision-making agreements. So that work group, we were able to develop a supported decision-making agreement template for Virginia. We created some just tools to help with that process. We created a number of frequently asked question documents and instructions. And further guidance, and it really became the kind of foundation of what we have been building off of over the past number of years. So just some numbers and data to give you an idea of what we have done since that work group. So from June 2022, which is when we started our first training and educational piece on supported decision making, all the way up through the end of this March 2025, we've conducted 142 trainings, both in person and virtually, and we've reached over 6,100 people. The people that we have reached with these trainings have been people with disabilities, self-advocates, friends and family members, providers, whether it's your support coordinator at Community Service Board or your actual waiver provider. We've done a lot of outreach with educators, those in the medical field, and also we've done some trainings for law providers, lawyers, and those in the legal field. We've had the opportunity to do a lot of partnership, which is really the heart of this. And so we've partnered with groups like the ARC of Virginia, PTSI, the Disability Law Center of Virginia, the Virginia Department of Education, DARS, VCU, and many, many more. So I really, really appreciate those partners. These numbers don't also reflect the number of resource fairs and conferences that we've been at, doing kind of information tables and consultations. It doesn't either account for the direct support and meetings that we have done with people who want help creating their agreements, because that's something that we do. And we are still continuing to outreach and try to make connections with people, especially in the field of finance and medical and legal. So if you guys have anybody out there that you think would be beneficial to talk to, or groups, please let me know. I am always happy to make connections and try to continue providing further education and support. So one of the things that we did in kind of helping guide us in our 2022 work group was focus on these 4 principles. And this was actually created from a work group that was done in 2021. And this is kind of what we have now utilized through everything that we've done with supported decision-making and the supported decision-making agreements. So the first thing is that we presume capacity. We presume that people are able to make decisions for themselves. This is not only a principle that we hold to, but it is also a code in Virginia that says anyone 18 years or older is presumed to be able to make decisions and provide informed consent, unless somebody else says otherwise, and that needs to be some kind of like judge or legal professional. There's a process for that. So we always want to start with presuming capacity. The second principle is that the least restrictive option should always be tried when somebody does need support or assistance. Remember, we all are always getting support when it comes to making decisions in our own lives, and that should be true for people with disabilities. The third principle looks at the fact that we recognize that sometimes people need a little bit more support. Sometimes people do need a substitute decision maker. However, in those times, those substitute decision makers should be taking into consideration what the person expresses as far as their preferences and desires. And that should be dictating the decision that the substitute decision maker makes, not what the substitute decision maker feels is easiest for them or what their own personal preferences are. And then finally, this last principle is the dignity of risk. So we've all talked about making decisions now at this time, and certainly we've all made our fair share of decisions that we'd probably redo if we could. So making decisions takes practice and growth, and making decisions that maybe don't have a good outcome or might sometimes be called poor decision making is not a reason that someone's restriction or that somebody should have restrictions placed on them in the forms of things like substitute decision making and legal guardianships. We should all have the opportunity to learn and grow from mistakes that we make. So now let's transition into the formal piece of the supported decision-making agreement. The supported decision-making agreement is the formal document that says who someone wants to support them, what parts of life they want support in, and how they want to be supported. In Virginia, a supported decision-making agreement is made up of at least 2 people, the decision maker and at least 1 supporter. And then we have this option of a 3rd person, which is a facilitator. So the decision maker is the person making the supported decision-making agreement. In Virginia, you have to be at least 18 years old or older. You have to have an intellectual or developmental disability, and you have to be legally able to make your own decisions, meaning a judge has not declared you to be legally incapacitated. So you can't have a legal guardian per se, or a full legal guardian for that matter, and have a supported decision-making agreement because you legally don't have the right or ability to make those decisions for yourself. Supporters are anybody that the decision maker trusts and asks to be a supporter, and the supporter then agrees to help a decision maker in the manner that is outlined within the agreement. Supporters can really be anybody. They can be family members, friends. They can also be paid supporters or people that are paid to provide assistance in other parts of somebody's life. But again, we do have that piece about making sure that it's not a conflict of interest. So maybe what you provide support with is something that is completely irrelevant from what you are doing paid-wise. The people that are supporting you might also do different things. So you might have one person that supports you with decisions around money, another person who supports you with decisions around health, and another person that supports you with decisions about work. One person or one supporter might also help with maybe thinking through different decisions, kind of making that pros and cons list. And then another person or supporter might go to meetings with you. And then another supporter might go to doctor's appointments and help you communicate. Really, there's no right or wrong way to be a supporter. It is truly up to the decision maker, what they want, what their preferences are, and what the supporter agrees to. Now we have this option of the facilitator. The facilitator is a person whose job is really to kind of oversee the agreement. They are really looking to make sure that supporters are doing what they say they are going to do based off of what's written in the agreement. They can help with coordinating meetings with supporters and the decision maker, that kind of thing. Both supporters and facilitators are not paid to provide the support or service. They are really agreeing to be more of a natural support in someone's lives. And then they have these very specific ways that they support someone based off of what's written in the agreement. They do not have the ability to agree to supports or services, to sign forms, to enter into contracts, or to make decisions for the decision maker. Because remember, the decision maker is the one that is making all of those final decisions and has all of their legal rights still. I do want to note that currently in Virginia, supported decision-making agreements are not legally binding. So a decision maker cannot sue a supporter for not maybe fulfilling what they say they are going to in the agreement. And usually supporters are not going to get in trouble for the decision that a decision maker makes, unless it is something where there's maybe a case of abuse, neglect, exploitation, kind of those kinds of areas. Right now, agreements are really not formally overseen by any entity, and we have really worked hard to make them as flexible as possible in order to reduce any types of barriers or red tape that people might come into contact with trying to create and implement supported decision-making agreements. So the benefits I'll go through quickly because we've already talked about benefits, but again, people are keeping their rights and final decision-making abilities, which all increases your self-determination. people then have the opportunity to develop their decision-making skills and other skills because they're exploring and trying out new things and hopefully living a more independent life. Supported decision-making agreements can be created, changed, and even canceled at any time and for free. So they are certainly seen as a cheaper or less expensive alternative. Again, they can also be used with other types of decision-making support tools like an advance directive or power of attorney. You can use all three of them at the same time because they all kind of do different things. Now, I know we've touched on risk some, but again, I think nothing in life is free of risk. We have definitely learned that. We even acknowledge the fact that people with guardians are not free of being abused and exploited. But one of the other things is that we need to acknowledge that there are natural barriers. So society puts barriers in place. There are laws, there are regulations, there are our own personal beliefs and values that put barriers in place that can all help protect people when it comes to making decisions. So I definitely want people to kind of think about that and not get too concerned about risk. Risk is something that needs to be addressed, but please keep in mind and honor this concept of dignity of risk. It's also important to remember that proper support and teaching and supporting people with developing skills are the things that reduce risk, and that is really what supported decision-making can offer. As a work group and as it was outlined in the code to direct DBHDS, we did create a protocol for addressing abuse and exploitation. This is something that we have provided training on, and there are additional resources related to this and the links on the slide. So there's videos and slides, and there's also a additional training that DARS provides around mandated reports. So let's look at the documents. We created a supported decision-making agreement template and then these 3 discovery tools to kind of help with the process of thinking through what you want and don't want and how to fill out the agreement. So the first is the When Do I Want Support tool. And this document looks at very common types of decisions and tasks that we have to do as adults. And it looks at, are these things that you either can do on your own with the help of someone else, or you need someone else to do for you entirely together, because even with support, you can't do it. And it's a simple check sheet. It is broken into life areas, and it's actually broken into the same life areas and the same tasks and decisions that are documented on the Virginia Supported Decision-Making Agreement template. So if you do this discovery tool, if you fill this out, then it is super easy to fill out the Virginia Supported Decision-Making Agreement template. I've also had teachers and other support people utilize this tool as a way to look at the development of IEP outcomes or independent living outcomes, those kinds of things. So everything that we talk about doesn't have to be used or can be used individually for other ways to support people. The next discovery tool is the What Kind of Support Do I Want tool. This is, again, an easy check sheet that looks at common ways people get support. So things like taking time, having forms explained or filled out, making that pros and cons list, doing research. We also have some blank sections where you can kind of fill in, here's other ways that I like people to help me. And for that matter, here are ways that I don't want to get help. I don't know how many parents I've talked to that have said, you know, I'm always trying to help my loved one, and they always come back and say that I wasn't helpful. And so then we dig a little bit deeper, and I find out that the parent was maybe helping in the way that they like to get help and had never necessarily thought about or had a discussion to figure out, how does my loved one like to be helped? Because we all like to get help differently. So it's really important to know this. And then our third discovery tool is the relationship map. And this is a way for you to kind of visually map out and see who is in your life that is somebody that you trust, and who might we be able to work with or reach out to be a potential supporter on a supported decision-making agreement. So this looks at people like your family members, your friends, people who are paid to help you at school or at work or in your community. Now, within the supported decision-making agreement, we cover these life areas. We look at health and personal care. We look at friends and partners and money, where you live and community living, school and education, working, your rights and safety, meeting with and talking with your supporters. And because we know we can't think of everything, we have a category of other, where you can go in and personalize this agreement template even more. The front page is pretty basic. It talks about you being the decision maker, what your rights are, and what the expectations of your supporters are. It provides contact information for how your supporters should get in touch with you, and then other forms of support that you might have. So do you have that power of attorney? Do you have an advance directive or anything like that? Do you have somebody that helps you formally with your finances? Then each life area is filled out the same way. You're either checking that you do or don't want support with this life area. If you do, then you're going to list who those supporters are. And then you're going to go through the various ways that somebody, or the various types of tasks or decisions you might need to make, and saying, yes, I either want support with this, or no, I don't. And if you do, who are those supporters that you listed that are going to help you with this? Either all of the supporters or just some. And then finally, we also have the agreements page, where you as the decision maker sign off and all of the supporters need to sign. And at the bottom of that is a very easy way to cancel the agreement if you no longer want it.
What's that? Yeah, you're good.
If you no longer want it, you just have to sign and date saying you no longer want this agreement. Within the agreement, there's also things like a agreement page for the facilitator. The notary page is optional. It was something that we got feedback on, where people felt like they did want to have that as an option for the support decision-making agreement template. Again, not required in Virginia, but it is optional if you want it. And then there is also, there are 2 documents that can kind of map out any changes you make to the agreement. So if you do make changes, because we do hope that, this is a living document that gets reviewed and updated, you don't have to fill out a whole new agreement every time. You can just document your changes there. We also created some other tools to help. Again, these instructions. We created plain language release forms. I couldn't tell you how many times I go to a doctor and I'm like, what are you asking for? And I'm realizing it's just a basic release of information form. So we have this medical release of information form and an educational release of information form, all in plain language. There's the support decision-making agreement tracking tool, where you can keep track of who did you give an agreement to and when did you give it to them, so that if you do an update, you know who you need to give updated versions to. We've got frequently asked question documents, and then a few other tools that we have created over time with updates, or excuse me, with feedback and support from self-advocates. So things like, how do I actually identify who I want to be my supporter? Once I've done all these discovery tools, how do I make them make sense and help me figure out who I should ask? And once I know who I want to be a supporter, how do I actually go about asking that person? So we have a tool that kind of helps give you a script or even a letter that you could send to them. This is also another thing that we created from feedback as far as a need. It was created with a group of self-advocates, and it is a pocket card that it says, it's my rights, and it talks about your right to make decisions for yourself and your right to utilize supported decision making. So if you're in those appointments or in those meetings and you're feeling like people aren't hearing you and aren't honoring your right to make decisions for yourself, you can pull out this card. You can either read it to them or show it to them and have that person read it. There's a QR code that takes them to more information. if that's needed. And so if this is something you want, you can access it through our website. There is a printable version, but I also have these like thicker, almost like credit card type ones that I am always happy to mail to families and to mail to people if they want them. You can just email me and I will put them in the mail for you. All of this information is on our website. All of the forms for supported decision-making agreements are on the website. They are available currently in English and Spanish, but if there's another language that's needed, please let me know. We will work on getting them translated. They are also available in Word documents as well as fillable PDF. So you can scan the QR code or type in that address and that will take you to all of the documents. So now I think with my last couple of minutes, I think I'm okay with a few more minutes. Is that right, Dr. Penny? Okay, thank you. We're just going to do some quick frequently asked questions that we have. So how do you create a supported decision-making agreement? I say with time. It definitely takes time. It's not something that I want you to feel rushed in or to feel like, oh, I only have 30 minutes to do it. Usually when I support people, I always kind of provide different options for doing this and figure out what does a person want, what works best for them. So sometimes we are breaking it down and doing one discovery tool per meeting. Sometimes we are just doing one life area per meeting or one section per meeting. It's really up to you, but please give yourself time because it is a lot to think about when you start thinking about, all of these specific preferences that you have and things that you want and don't want. That's a lot to think about. So be kind to yourself. Other people can help with creating these. So it can be family members, it can be friends, it can be your case manager or support coordinator. There is no one person that is solely responsible for creating these agreements. And then I am also always here to provide that support. So if it is something that you're interested in considering or say, yes, I really want to create an agreement, that please reach out to me. And I'm always happy to meet with you to go through that process. So do I have to use these forms, those discovery tools, or the Virginia Supported Decision-Making Agreement template? And that answer is no. In Virginia right now, you do not have to use any of them. You can create your own agreement. However, we do ask for consistency's sake that your agreement includes these 4 elements. So who does the decision maker want as their supporters? When does the decision maker want help? What kinds of things do they want help with? And how are they going to get that help? What is the supporter going to do to help them? And then finally, everybody signs and dates the agreement. That's what we ask for if you're going to write your own. And do I have to have a supported decision-making agreement? And that answer is no. Everyone has the right to ask for help when they want it and from who they want it from. You can bring people to appointments, to doctor's appointments, to planning meetings, to IEP meetings, all of that kind of stuff, whether or not you have a supported decision-making agreement. For that matter, you could have a supported decision-making agreement and bring somebody that's not even a supporter on it to an appointment or a meeting. That is your right. So you don't have to have them. It is just a tool that helps people know who in your life you want to help you and in what areas do you want help. There's also other ways to kind of document this kinds of stuff. So again, you could have a power of attorney, an advanced medical directive, or you could have those and the supported decision-making agreement. And if people already use supported decision-making, why create a supported decision-making agreement? Formalizing supported decision-making by creating this agreement can help ensure that your choices are heard and respected. Sometimes people in your community, so maybe like your teachers, other educational providers, doctors, lawyers, bankers, they might think that, oh, maybe you have a specific diagnosis or disability, so you don't have capacity and you don't have the ability to make decisions, just purely because they either see something or have read or heard something. So They might even say, hey, you have to have a legal guardian or a conservator to do certain things. And that's just simply not true. Supported decision-making agreements help others know that you can make decisions and that you have the support from people that you trust to make sure that you've got the information you need to be able to truly make an informed decision. When we all recognize supported decision-making and supported decision-making agreements, we are then saying that we acknowledge and honor the rights of people with disabilities. And this is something that as a whole society, we really need to work on recognizing and acknowledging more. How do I tell other people about my right to make decisions and to use supported decision-making? So I tried to gather a handful of resources. These are going to be live links, and I know that Dr. Sweetenberg-Lee will send out a copy of the PowerPoint later on. And so you can click on all of these and easily get to these resources. But I tried to pull some different advocacy tools and information for both the decision makers and self-advocates and those supporting them. So you have things like the It's My Right pocket card. There's also a more lengthy letter that goes along with it if you need to provide more information. There are several other self-advocacy toolkits for medical situations through the Virginia Department of Health, through DBHDS, and through VCU. There are programs like I'm Determined, which teach all about self-determination. And then even PTSI has a whole series of supported decision-making workbooks for different parts, like one for finance, one for healthcare, one for education. Now, on the hand for your supporters, PT also has toolkit for supporters when it comes to teaching self-advocacy. And there's also some other tools related to learning more about creating kits to help with supporting in self-advocacy and resources for parents. I also included a both column, which is important information to know. So supported decision-making in the summer of 2024, so just a handful of months ago, was finally recognized as a reasonable modification under Section 504. So please know your laws. I'm a bit of a code and law and regulation person myself, so while it might not always be easy to understand, know that there are things out there that do support your rights. So there's also some variety of other documents on here that are tools that can be used for self-advocacy. And then there's also some trainings that can support people. So one specifically for decision makers and self-advocates, VCU offers, it's called LEAP. It all talks about developing healthy relationships, identifying healthy relationships, and how to respond if maybe you find yourself in a relationship that is not safe and healthy. There's a similar training then that is offered for supporters and family members and caregivers. There's also person-centered thinking training that teaches a whole host of tools to better learn how to support people and identify what they want and don't want. And then there are also some other trainings such as that anybody can take related to supported decision-making. That's a recorded training, as well as a health advocacy training through VCU.
Sarah, our time is up.
Okay, I will just move through all these resources you guys can access, but I do hope that when you are making choices, you make your choices that reflect your hopes and not your fears. So thank you all for your time.
Wow. So we have had two dynamic presenters. This information is so outstanding. I'm sure, Sarah, you didn't see all of the expressions coming through the chat, but between you and Attorney Jonathan, they have loved this presentation, and you have been very valuable today. I want to thank you both for first accepting all of the 2025 questions that came through our registration process. We are visionary enough to ask any registrant who has a question to give it to us on the front end, so that both of you have incorporated a number of the answers. But there are several questions that have come in, and we will take the next 10-15 minutes to try to answer them. I'm going to yield to Christine if we can process them as quickly as possible. And then about 5 minutes we're going to put the second evaluation poll up, because we want all of our participants to please give us feedback on this session. Christine, I'll yield to you.
Absolutely, Dr. Penny. Thank you so much. That was a lot of very helpful information. That's what a lot of the praise has been in the chat, but there are numerous questions. I don't know that we'll be able to get to all of them. The first question was, did Dr. Kemka publish the curriculum she used in her study?
I did see that question. Her studies are available through Google Scholar. I would recommend just searching for her last name, Khemka, and self-determination.
Okay, excellent. The next question, one of the roadblocks that individuals are experiencing is finding an objective consultation of options from attorneys because they're only offering guardianship.
First suggestion is, if that's all someone has to say to you, find someone else. And my email I just put in the chat. I think it's all of our responsibility to help people know that there are options. I thought Sarah's presentation was spectacular on that regard, and thank you so much for that information. I would also put in a commercial from my old office. The Disability Law Center of Virginia, dlcv.org, also does some work around supported decision making. I had the honor to work for them for over a decade. But my email's in the chat. If I can't help you, I'll try to help you find someone who can.
Excellent. So what additional efforts are being made to educate and raise awareness on supported decision making? I believe, Sarah, you covered quite a bit, but are there any other opportunities?
For me, we hold monthly trainings on a schedule. We do a supported decision making and supported decision making agreements more for providers and community service boards, that kind of thing. Then we also do one specifically for people interested in them and possible supporters. And then the third training that I offer throughout the year is all around decision making options. So looking at everything from supported decision making agreements all the way to guardianship. What do those look like? How to access them in Virginia, what you need to know and not know, or well, I guess what you need to know when considering those options. And outside of that, I am always reaching out to try to make connections with people to see where I can do trainings and information sessions with specific groups.
I would add this to that. The most important training and educational resource is not Sarah, is not me, is you. If you feel that you now gained information that is helpful, tell two people and tell them to tell two people. As wonderful as these training sessions are, its reach is necessarily limited by the people who are listening right now or who might see the recording. But you have the ability to tell other people, to become ambassadors for supported decision making. And I have to tell you, your experience, especially if you've been able to make supported decision making work or believe in it, is far more valuable than anything I have to say. So if it's something that interests you, that you know about, that you learn about, that speaks to your life experience, then share it, because that's going to have the greatest impact.
I completely agree with that. Yeah, I think that, learning from people that have been through it is the best way to learn.
Excellent. Excellent. So do we know what is being done to make supported decision making as code within Virginia?
It's already recognized in part of the code. It was just uploaded into the chat. There's already part of the Virginia code that says judges must consider, before entering a guardianship, they must consider supported decision making as a less restrictive alternative, which is a fairly recent addition. It was after Jenny's case. So it just shows that small things, or in case of Jenny, large things, can have even larger impacts.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think that Virginia is just I'm going to say we're on the very early end of our journey with this. And so I think that certainly you all, advocates, self-advocates, family members that are advocates, if there are changes that you want to see, please reach out to your legislatures, please, and your representatives, please contact them and say what changes you want to know about or you want to see. we do what we can here at the state. We have a report that we provide to the General Assembly every year, based off of, what we've done. And then also the feedback we receive as far as what people want to see. We have a recommendations piece to that. So I always keep track of what people say so that I can include that in the report. But what I say as in my role doesn't have the same impact that you have. You as the citizen, you as the one utilizing it, really your voice is the one that matters and should be heard. So.
Great. Another question, are you able to further explain the legal rights of an authorized representative?
Question for that would be, are they talking about the DBHDS authorized representative or like a legally authorized representative? That would be, because it does, the like legal authorized representative is kind of a general term for somebody that is legally able to make decisions for somebody else. And then we have this DBHDS authorized representative that when someone is determined to not have the capacity to consent to services or the release of information for a specific entity or provider, then a authorized representative can be appointed to do that for them, but only while that person lacks capacity and only for those specific things and for that provider.
Wonderful. And a quick question. Would the It's My Right card work at the voting polls?
Really good question. I have not heard anybody use that, but Jonathan, do you?
Look, as a blanket discussion on this issue, this is why education and advocacy is so important, because all of the cards in the world don't matter if people on the other side aren't listening. So you have to be vigilant. You have to be advocates. You have to do more. And I love the It's Your Right card. I've seen it. I support it. It's not enough, because all it takes is one person who doesn't understand to say, I'm not paying attention to this. And there was one question that was submitted earlier about, how we make sure people comply with supported decision making, or how we make sure that there's legal force behind it. And someone said an attorney told them that it's not necessarily recognized in Virginia. And while that's not true, of course, supported decision-making is recognized. Really, the question comes down to, are other people going to comply with it? It's why one of the things that I've been strongly supportive of is not just relying on people's good faith. Put some law behind it. Powers of attorney and advance directives are things that people understand. I think people have a great belief in what I call stuff, legal stuff. Sarah was right when she said before, everyone has the right to make choices. And that is something I believe in my bones. But until we get to the point where society supports people's right to make choices, we need to have some oomph behind it. So things like a power of attorney that says, this is my supporter who is empowered to do this, that, or the other. I want this person to come to the voting booth with me. I want this person to come to the doctor with me, and I give that permission. So you have something you can show that's legal, I think is going to be a very good idea to do. You shouldn't have to. One of my favorite and saddest sayings is, it ain't fair, but it's factual. But do what you have to do to protect your rights, not just say that you have them.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. We could go on for another 2 hours, but we don't have that luxury. It is 1:51. I want to yield to our Executive Director for Virginia Board for People with Disabilities to offer her comments and reflections. Terry.
Well, it's really to offer my thank you. Thank you, Jonathan and Sarah. We really appreciate you being with us today, and all of the people. I think I saw 155 at one point who were here, and just based on the comments in the chat, were really they learned a lot. And that old adage, knowledge is power. And you helped us all be a little bit more knowledgeable today, and that gives us a little bit more power. And I think that people have learned more about supported decision making, why it's important, the why, as you talked about, Jonathan, and how it can be done in Virginia. So just heartfelt thank you for being with us today and sharing this great information that will go beyond today, because we did record this It will be watched on Facebook, I believe, for the next 30 days. We get a great response on Facebook. It will also be posted to our YouTube channel. So if people aren't able to, capture it on Facebook, they'll be able to capture it on YouTube. And I think that's correct. Anita will correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. Okay. And, Dr. Penny, Kelly, Christine, thank you for pulling this together, and the fantastic training alumni who bring important topics to us and said, this is what people want to know more about. So thank you all very much. And I hope everybody has a great weekend and rest of the day. And I guess, I just want to make a comment because there's, so much craziness going on right now and so much concern about the rolling back of rights for people with disabilities, rights, services, funding, that, it's really important that we all stay vigilant and that we all, continue to demand the rights, that are ours, that are yours, that we don't let things be rolled back, and that we continue to move forward, and supported decision-making is moving forward from, centuries to a better place. So, here's hope for a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. We needed that. We needed that. A lot's going on in the world. And we want to shout out to all of our alumni that are here as well, and all of our registrants. There were over 300 persons who registered, as Terry said, thanks to our communications information manager. This is not only being recorded, but it will be on our web page, on our Facebook link, and eventually on our YouTube page. And so we are anticipating probably over 600 has been the kinds of numbers that have been viewing these presentations. This is our last one for this state year. And so we will return in August of 2025 to start the new continuing education sessions. We will be meeting with our alumni leaders on May 31st. To strategically determine what the new topics will be. We invite any of you, if you'd like to drop in the chat or send to our training@vbpd.virginia.gov email account, training@vbpd.virginia.gov email account. If you would like to send any suggestions or recommendations for topics you'd like to see Virginia Board entertain and perhaps offer in the new state year, July 1 through June 30th, we would appreciate that, and we invite you to do that. Want to say thank you and ditto, as Terry said, to Attorney Jonathan Martinez and Ms. Sarah Thompson. You both are dynamic. We will be seeing you in our PIP, Partners in Policymaking training class in the next year that starts again, kicks off in September of 2025 and will run through April of 2026. And so your presentations are dynamic and we need you. So thank you so very much to all of the team that helps to deliver this. We thank you all so very, very much. And we hope that you will have a wonderful, wonderful weekend, and that we'll keep, as Terry said, advocating, speaking up for our rights. Reach out to your legislators, write letters, email, worry them to death with phone calls, and let them know that we, on behalf of people with disabilities, will not tolerate what they are attempting to do to roll back our rights. We deserve what we have and even more. So thank you so very much for attending today. It is 1:56 and we thank you and have a good rest of your Friday. Bye-bye.